So in this short clip, I'm going to show you how to use the if, ELIF and else commands in Python. Before I do that, I'll just show you the basic concept of selection. So in selection, so this is a simple program here, and we're saying here, getting two numbers as an input, and then saying if number 1 is greater than number 2, then print first number is bigger, else the second number is bigger. And if I was to show you this in a flowchart, so this is an example of a selection in flowchart. So selection meaning making a choice. So we have input a number, first number, input the second number. Is number 1 greater than number 2? No. Then output number 2 is bigger, else number 1 is bigger. And remember, using the correct chart, so that's a decision time to show there's a selection. I mentioned selection here. That's part of the bigger programming concept, what we call sequence, selection and iteration. So sequence means one instruction after another, and selection means making a choice, and iteration, which is loops, which we will show in a later lesson. So going back to the program, so I've got, we've seen this before, so we say the variable, we set the variable number 1 is equal to the first input, and we use the int command, remember, to convert the text input into an integer. And then we have the second program that says, second variable, sorry, that says take the input. And then this command here, now this is where we use the if command. We say if number 1 is greater than number 2, then print the first number is the biggest, else the second biggest is the number is bigger. So if I just show you a chart here, how this works. So on the side here, we'll say, okay, with an if operation, we're saying if the following is true, then do the next operation. So we put the conditions following the if, and now this can be a single condition or it can be multiple conditions, and I'll explain that later. In this case, it's a single condition. It's saying is number 1 greater than number 2. Now this is called an operator, and what that does is a comparative operator. It compares two numbers, and using either greater than or less than, and it will either return true or false. And I'll show you on the right hand side the list of operators available in Python. So we're using greater than, and we're saying is this first number greater than the second number? And we also use this little colon here. It's very important in Python. You put colons in to say it, if this condition is true, then do the following. Another important concept in Python is what we call indentation. Now, in programming in Python, if we have an if statement, we have to tell Python that in order to say, well, if this condition is correct, I want you to perform the following code. And you can only do that by indenting to say that that print operation is part of that if operation. If I do this, which you'll get an error, because what it's saying is, I've got this if, you've told me, you give me no code to indicate what happens if that statement is true, because you haven't indented it to say that is part of that code. Don't over indent, don't go that way, and at the same time don't under indent, using the tab key on the left hand side of your keyboard. The else bit says, well, if that condition isn't met, then do this. So it's saying else. Notice this stays in line with the if. This isn't indented because it's not part of that if statement. It's the second part of the if statement. So it stays in line with that if statement. And then we indent it again to tell me that that print is part of that else statement. So if I was to run this program, you should now see it work. And it'll say, please enter the first number, and I'll say 20. Please enter the second number. And it says the second number is bigger than the first, which is true. Because it said, is 20 greater than 30? No, then do the following. Okay, that's the first program. Now we move on to the next. So in this next part, I'm going to show you how to do multiple ifs in Python. So multiple ifs in Python are used when you've got lots and lots of conditions for a given situation. So if we look at this example, you're collecting a mark, a student's test mark as a percentage. So you get the input, the same command as normal, using the input command with the parameters, please enter your percentage score. This is then going to be turned into an integer, i.e. a whole number, and that will be then applied to the variable called test score. Notice if you want more than one word in a variable name, you have to use an underscore. You can't use spaces in variable names. Now, the way then if ELIF works in combination with the else statement is allows you to do multiple conditions if the first condition is not met. So we'll go through this program. So this will say if the test mark is above 90, then print you have got a grade 9. In other words, if you've got above 90%, you get a grade 9. It prints out grade 9. Remember the indent, that's been indented, so then we go back. Now ELIF means the first condition hasn't been met, so else, we're going to do else if. So it's a short-term version for else if. So if it's not, first condition isn't met, then do another condition. It says, well, if it's not 90 or it's not greater than 90, is it greater than 50? In which case you've got a mark between 5 and 8. Now I could have added more ELIFs because I haven't covered the grades 6, 7 and 8, but this is just to show you as an example. And then I do another else. So if that condition's not met, that condition's not met, then go to the next condition. Else if the test score is above 20, then print you have a grade 1 4. Now the last part, which is the else, you always leave the else to the end, because what you're saying is if that condition's not met, and if that condition's not met, and if that condition's not met, then if all else fails, then we go to the last condition saying if else, then prints you clearly haven't got any of those grades, then you've got ungraded. Now I have done this, as you can see, because it's a score from 1 to 100. Obviously I've gone down from 90, because obviously if it's not above 90, I go to the next one down, and then the next one down, and so forth. So you've got to be very careful on which if follows which if statement in an if else statement. So in this short clip, I'm going to show you how to use logical operators in if statements. So looking at the program we've got in front of us, so I've got a test score, which entering the test score as before, but now we're going to change the if statement slightly. So we are going to use and, or, and not logical operators. Now an and operator basically says if both conditions are true, then we can the whole statement is true. The or says if one or the other statement is true, then it's true. And not means it's invert. It basically says if it's not this, then do that. So I'm going to take the scores again, and I said if the test score is greater than or equal to 90 and the test score is less than or equal to 100, then print you've got a grade 9. Notice I haven't used an ELIF, and the reason being is by doing it this way, only this condition can be met, and you can only get a grade 9 if it's greater than 90 and less than 100. And we can go into a next if statement without having to rely on the previous if statement. Now you'll notice that it's saying to me in the IDE, in this program, that I need to simplify the statement, and it's with Python, rather than writing it like that, I can just write it like that. So I could say 90 is less than test score and the test score is less than 100. So it's a kind of a quicker way of writing it, but obviously that doesn't demonstrate the and logical operator. So again, I've done it again. If it's greater than 80 and less than 89, then I print a grade 8. Now it's saying I could simplify it, so I could do as I've written there for the next statement. Now the or statement is slightly different. So what it's saying there is if the test score is less than 0 or the test score is greater than 100, then print it's an error. So basically I'm saying this statement can be true or that statement can be true in order for me to print an error. So obviously if I input a result less than 0 and greater than 100, that's not a correct percentage, so I'd have to print an error. Alternatively, I can use the not command, so I can say if the test score is not in the range of 0 to 100, then it's an invalid. Now the command you won't have seen here before is the in command and the range command. The range command says just generate your numbers between 0 and 100, and the ins is used as in sets, and it's saying if that score is not in the set 0 to 100, then it's an invalid score. So if we run this, and I'll prove that it works, so let's say I get a score of 95%, then that first condition's met, that condition's met, so it's printed out grade 9 twice, so that's why I've got a grade 9. That is correct. So I'll run it again, and this time I'm going to put an invalid score, so let's say 105%. It then produces an error because it is less than 0 or it's 100, greater than 100, and it's also not in the range 0 to 100. Alright, so that's some useful ways of using the and, or, and not logical operators. So to recap, we've covered the logical operators or, and not. They are used in if statements, so for example, if condition 1 and condition 2. And also the not command inverts the condition, so true becomes false and false becomes true. Looking at the program that we did, you can identify and see that the different operators, so and, or, and not logical operators.